This is it. Probably the last chance to really improve your team before the MLB season sadly wraps up. But you still got a little less than 2 weeks to finish strong in your Roto League, or maybe you just play down to the wire in your head to head league. Either way, let's look at the best waiver wire pickups as the season comes to a close. Now, most of the time in September, we're either taking shots on rookies or mining for value on those non-playoff contenders. But whether Boston winds up making that wild card or not, they're going to be glad that they got Trevor Story back because he's been doing his part to try to get them there. And I know it's easy to forget Trevor Story. I wasn't even sure he was going to play this season. He did return, and he's somehow looking like he didn't miss a beat despite missing the entire season up until September hit. In his first 40 plate appearances, got 10 base hits, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, and even 4 steals already. He's now batting fifth in that pretty good Red Sox lineup and somehow less than 20% rostered across Yahoo leagues, even less than that in ESPN leagues. Now, I get it. A lot of teams are just out of it, maybe not paying attention, but maybe some people aren't even paying attention to the waiver wire. A lot of teams that are at the top of the standings aren't bothering. They're just going to roll with what they got. You could still get Trevor Story in your fantasy league. I also understand why some fantasy owners are just skeptical because so much time he's missed. Maybe he'll get banged up again. Maybe he won't be the same guy. He looks like the same guy. So, again, if he's out there at all, just grab him now. But now let's turn to those lesser teams and rookies. Well, let's start with a guy who, believe it or not, was one of the, I guess you could say, front runners. Okay, maybe 13th in terms of preseason rookie of the year predictions for the National League. The odds were not really in his favor, but Hunter Goodman did his best to get himself completely off of the running because he was just miserable when he first got called up. In fact, one look right now, his season batting average, it's 193. That would just be enough to completely turn you off. But as always, it's what have you done lately? And he has been jacking home runs left and right, and the batting average isn't hurting you. In fact, just this past week, Goodman hitting .318 with 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, and 6 runs scored. Goodman, you may know, is a catching prospect who's had great raw power. It seemed like his bat would play perfectly in Coors Field, but of course, you need to make contact in order for that power to actually result in anything. He's finally figured it out. His first call up didn't go so well. Spent a little time in the minors. He's back and he's figured it out. So at this point, look, power or even just anything that you need in fantasy, Goodman is producing across the board except for steals. And here's the best part, even though he's not playing catcher really in Colorado, he still qualifies at catcher, at first base, and in the outfield. It goes without saying, a slugger like this will be prone to some really bad slumps like he had early this season and some outbursts like he's had recently. So it could always turn the other way, but look, we've got just a few games left. Just keep rolling him out there and see what happens. You could also take a chance on a guy who's been kind of disappointment. Maybe you could call him a bust. TJ Friedl kind of broke out last year, had a nice combination of both power and speed, and even hit for average. Although he did overachieve based on expected stats, still, this looked like a really nice kind of late third outfielder in the middle rounds of fantasy drafts. And all he's done this year is just go back and forth from the injured list. 3 different IL stints this year, and even when he was with the Reds and up and down, some weeks he looked like he was going to be that guy again, and some weeks he was dropped in a lot of leagues even when he was healthy because he was hurting you. So, really a mixed bag or just a bag full of frustration for Friedl. But it looks like he also wants to finish strong since being back up in Cincinnati in the month of September. He's hitting .298 with 3 home runs and 14 RBIs and a pair of steals. Now, he did just take a seat against the left-handed starter, which is Chris Sale. Can't blame the Reds for that, but he is on the strong side of a platoon there, playing most days. We know what he can do because he did it last year. The batting average isn't always going to be super high, but when he's hot, and right now he's hot. The same goes for Davis Schneider for the Blue Jays. This guy who had a really nice May, was showing a little bit of pop. Looked like he might stick as an everyday player somewhere, but it wasn't meant to be. Of course, this whole Blue Jays lineup has been kind of a mess this season. Well, now they're going to need Schneider because, promising rookie Will Wagner moved to the 60-day IL. His season is over. And then Bo Bichette was scratched. Looks like he's going to miss some time again. Schneider, well, he's deserved that he's gotten this playing time as of late because he's also suddenly on a power binge, which is odd because it's kind of crazy if you look at it. Now, granted, Schneider was not playing every day until recently, but he went 2 months, that's right, 2 whole months without hitting a single home run. I think it was a 54 game stretch without a home run. And then he hit a home run in 3 straight games. It's just hard to explain sometimes. Look, Schneider is a guy who has shown in his limited time in the majors, he can go on a heater. Late last season, remember, he's a must add. Was one of the hottest hitters in the majors when he first got brought up to the Blue Jays. And then went ice cold. Same thing this season. So again, this is a guy you write it out when he is on a tear. Then you just stick with it, no questions asked. He's hitting fifth in this Toronto lineup, so got some RBI opportunities here. Like also a guy you can stick at either second base or the outfield. And then yes, I am gonna throw out a Marlins hitter here. Let's start with a guy who's been forgotten about. It is Otto Lopez, second baseman and shortstop for the Fish. Now, before I dig into Lopez, what he's done lately, let me remind you, Xavier Edwards should be rostered everywhere. Don't know why he isn't, like 100%. Xavier Edwards, if he's out there, you just have to go get him. End of story. Over Lopez, over all these guys. Maybe not Trevor Story. Edwards just reached the 30 steal mark, despite, remember, not even being with the club the first month of the season. 5 steals this past week. He's hitting 319 on the season. But again, he's actually owned in about 2/3 of fantasy leagues, so probably most competitive leagues. You aren't getting him. If he's out there, get him. If not, you can sell for Lopez and feel pretty good. Lopez does have some speed, a little bit of pop, but suddenly, for some reason, he's turned into like an RBI machine. This past week, Lopez does have a couple of steals, but 6 RBIs, couple of home runs, and he's batting .348. Overall, the month of September, hitting a .333. Also finishing strong, possibly earning himself a chance to lock down a starting job or at least a solid role with this club next season. Now, as we get to pitching, going to flip it a little bit here. I'm going to start with the closers because it's going to be more important, I think, at this point to find a guy who can get you a couple of saves if you do need that, than a couple of starts because most pitchers right now got maybe 2 starts left in them max. But let's start in New York. Looks like Clay Holmes has been demoted from that closer role, rightfully so. And Luke Weaver seems to be the guy who's picking it up. Weaver does now have 2 saves, but only 2 saves since September 6th. But I will just say this, look, in a game on Thursday night, Holmes was used in the 8th inning of a loss. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious he's not the guy anymore, especially with a guy like Weaver now picking up saves. Weaver has never been a closer before. Remember, this is a converted starter, guy who spent time in Arizona. Didn't go too swimmingly. He moved around to like Cincinnati. He's finally figured out the bullpen is his home. He's been really good, rock solid in middle relief for the Yankees all season. He has earned this. But I will say this, even if he doesn't get a ton of saves, because maybe he's not the only guy in the mix here, he still can help you out because he is getting you strikeout upside. In fact, one of his saves the other day was a 2-inning save. Just in his last 2 appearances, he has 9 strikeouts. That's not something you usually get from a closer or late inning guy. Definitely can help your ratios. On the season, he's got a 3.02 ERA and a 0.95 whip. But even that's not nearly as good as Tyler Holton for the suddenly red-hot Detroit Tigers. Now, Holton isn't the only guy there in the 9th inning mix. In fact, Jason Foley seems to have regained that job, but Holton is also somebody that gets used at times, so he still does have some save upside. I will say again, Foley's the guy I prefer. Foley's probably rostered in your league if it's still at all in doubt, but if Foley's out there, get Foley. But again, Holton isn't just valuable for saves. These guys actually kind of flip back and forth. He was used as an opener at some points and then also now used as a closer. Either way, whatever role he's been given, he's been pretty much dominant. Since the All-Star break, he's only given up 2 earned runs over his last 38 innings. That's brought it down to a 0.47 ERA and a 0.63 whip. His StatCast numbers are just off the charts, great, except for one key category, and that's strikeouts. His strikeout percentage just kind of average, kind of lowish, 21%, which is why he doesn't profile so much as a closer, but it's still fine. And again, with those ratios are so low, can get you the occasional save here. This guy could just help you in the late innings. Now, if you really want K upside, go back to the rotation here. Got to look at Frankie Montas, who, again, since the trade deadline, has been a different guy in Milwaukee, has really helped to stabilize their rotation. One thing he's doing, despite some inconsistencies, he hasn't been great every start. He continues to rack up strikeouts like he hasn't ever before. Over the past month, he has the fifth most strikeouts across the majors, with 42 in 36.2 innings pitched. If you look at his season long stats, you wouldn't be too impressed, but just looking at since the trade deadline went down and he became a Brewer, 3.55 ERA and a 1.16 whip. I mean, based on that, really surprised. It looks like he's 28% rostered in Yahoo right now. That means he's still out there in a lot of competitive leagues, only 13% in ESPN. I mean, don't you pay attention? Now, the only tricky thing here is now with the Brewers having wrapped up the Central Division, I mean, he will get at least one more turn in the rotation. You got to wonder if they give him a rest. I would think he would get a second start, but you never know. So just keep an eye on that. But you'll get at least one more turn from him. You could definitely get strikeouts, another quality start. So Montes, again, for some strikeout upside down the stretch, got to be your first choice. Now, Jose Quintana of the Mets, not getting you that. I can just tell you right now, an 18.1% strikeout rate. That's remained low, and he's never really been a high K kind of guy, but he's definitely going to get you a nice ERA and whip. In fact, over the past month, he's been one of the best in both categories, a 1.95 ERA, 0.95 whip, and quality start after quality start for just in the past month. It's really kind of impressive for a guy getting a little bit older, for a major league pitcher, despite having a fastball that averages 90.7 miles per hour, one of the lower marks in the majors. He somehow has a plus 10 run value for his four seam fastball. Location, location, location. Mets are definitely in the thick of it, hoping to lock down a wild card spot, and they get their rival, the Braves, next. That's going to be Quintana's next go at Atlanta. So a little bit of risk there, not going to lie, especially the Braves now all of a sudden starting to hit. But Quintana's been so good. I think you got to trust it compared to everybody else out there in the waiver wire. And he does get Milwaukee on the road. But again, Milwaukee's got things locked up. Maybe that's a soft one for him. And if we need to get deeper, you're saying like those guys just aren't out there. Let's take a chance on a rookie on a good team. That would be Landon Knack of the Dodgers. He's bounced back and forth between, majors, minors, rotation, not. But as we've been saying pretty much the entire year, the Dodgers need help there. They're needing a guy like this who can just be there every fifth day. And he's done that. He's done a pretty respectable job here. Despite somehow having a 3-4 record, he's been pretty solid. 3.39 ERA, 1.07 whip. Now, interesting thing with Knack, he's got a really good expected batting average of 221. He's generally keeping opposing hitters off the base paths, and one thing I always like, a nice low walk rate, 6.8%. But there's definitely some risk here, and that's the thing with Knack is, the other day he did get lit up. If he's off because he's more of a fly ball pitcher, and his barrel and hard hit rates aren't particularly good. So he will at times get rocked. You got to take a chance here because he's been mostly good, and he also doesn't have too bad of a matchup coming up here. He gets San Diego, a good team, but again, it's not like it's a monstrous offense, not enough to push me off of him when he's been mostly good. His last start in Coors Field. All right, so normally that sounds scary. How scary is it these days? So I can't tell you, especially for a fly ball pitcher, that playing at Colorado is not risky. It is definitely risky, but you're taking a chance here either way. If you're playing the waiver wire toward the end of your season, I would at least go with a guy who's been pretty consistently good and has a chance to get a win for the Dodgers. While fantasy baseball is about to come to an end for this season, fantasy football is just getting started. So I'll say again, if you play or if you're just interested in getting into it, you need to check out the Fantasy Football Endgame channel right here.